guys, welcome back. I am headed to a book signing at the Strand. It is raining today. I'm going to a signing for Rage Becomes Her, The Power of Women's Anger by Soraya Chemaly. If you guys didn't see it, I did a full book review of this because I had an arc of it and I really loved it, so I'm super excited to get to actually meet the author, and I thought I would vlog a little bit of the experience.
Please join me in welcoming Soraya Chemaly and Sumita Mukhopadhyay to Strand.
Hello, everyone's smiling. They don't look angry.
No.
But we all know what's underneath those smiles, don't we? Can't really think of a better topic right now. To be thinking and talking about. I think you have been working and thinking about this book for a long time.
Yes. I probably, not kidding, written 20 book proposals over 4 years. And I kept rewriting them and rewriting them. And then finally, I wrote one right after the election. And I thought, wow, I'm really mad. And I didn't control that in the proposal, and I don't know how that's going to go. And then I got a call from my editor, and she said, you know, when you're angry, no one wants to put that down. And I really think, and I'm like, oh, good.
I came in like from the Javits Center, what I call the feminist zombie apocalypse.
Yeah.
and people crying, and I walked out, and I came back to my team so unprofessional. I said, everything I've worked for is meaningless.
What if it's done? It's over.
They were all like, should we go home?
I was talking this morning, and a lot of people's response when they haven't read the book or they just hear the word anger is, their response is, we don't need more anger in the world, and we don't need more anger in the United States. And I'm like, well, that's nice for you, because we have this anger. The question is, what are we going to do with it? Where is it? And when I hear someone say that, what I mainly hear is, we don't want to know what you know. Okay, well, what is it about what I'm saying I know that makes you so uncomfortable? And I really think that the anger is a Trojan horse.
It's very rare that people talk about anger outside of this like flippant way of like, oh, well, that's just like an angry woman, right? What I really appreciate about the book is it's this very well thought out meditation on the kind of implications of this, of the fact that we sideline women's anger and we don't kind of create a space for it. You start the book out, there's this really remarkable scene with your mother where you see her throwing china, an otherwise well-behaved woman.
Yes.
Set the context of that scene and kind of what happened before and after.
So it's pretty funny, actually. I was maybe 14 or 15, and I walked into the kitchen, which was on a second floor, and the terrace outside, and she was standing out there with a stack of plates, and she was throwing them like frisbees. She literally just tossing them, and this is not a normal thing to see.
And it's your wedding china.
It's just, well, the other thing that's interesting is, over the years, my mother loves China, and so which I find an interesting commentary on domesticity, because there was China for certain things. So she's standing there and she's throwing these things off, and they're flying through the air, and then they're crashing. And there's one, and then another, and then another, and she comes back in, and she goes, well, how was your day? and you really need to know my mom, who's about 5 feet tall, incredibly full of energy, one of the kindest people I know, and you need to know all of that to know how mad she was. And so I thought, well, she really doesn't want me to ask how her day was, so I'm just going to do my homework. But it was a perfect example of how we just didn't talk about anger at all. She wasn't going to talk about it, I wasn't going to talk about it, she didn't explain it, it was something she did in isolation. I never knew why. 40 years later, I asked. And she said, she burst out loud and she goes, I threw a lot more plates than you ever saw. So I said, well, do you remember that? Like, do you remember that plate throwing? And she did. And what she described was, I think, a situation very typical to women who are in heterosexual marriages, particularly very traditional. My parents were both Catholic. She had converted to Catholicism. And she said, you know, I was really tired of working hard all day, looking really nice at the end of the day, no matter what. My mother looked incredibly beautiful at the end of the day. She said, and I'd have dinner prepared, and then your father just wouldn't show up until he felt like it. And I was like, and so you threw the plates? She goes, yeah, I threw the plates. And so we talked about that, because she did something a lot of women do, which is to externalize the anger in a way that doesn't infringe on the relationship. It doesn't actually help. There's nothing about throwing the plates that changed my father's behavior or made demands on him. It taught me a lot of lessons, like don't talk about the anger, it's really destructive, like all of these things, you know. Why could he just do this? Because she would never do this. And so we strategized, and so she did all of the things that you might want someone to do. She politely used her words. She stopped, she kind of body blocked him, because she could do that. She was very tall. That didn't work. She moved. This is something that drives me crazy. She moved where she was playing. And his parents kept saying things. They were textbook boys will be boys apologies for not holding a child accountable. He's a boy, he's so destructive, he can't help himself. It's so tempting, and in my head, of course, I'm going, rape, 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 rape. And that's not something you can spit out and play in like a preschool, right? Like you're really setting these kids up. And
Just see with the parent-teacher meeting.
the
Like, this is
parent-teacher
rape
meeting,
culture.
this is rape culture. And what was really interesting about this whole thing was there was another little boy, and I didn't actually write this in this, I've written about it before. And that little boy, he really wanted to do the same thing. But his parents had really taught him. And so he went up to her one day and he said, you know, I think it'd be fun if we broke it down. And she was like, I think it would be fun too. And I'm like, oh, sex. They're only 4. So, but what that really was emblematic of was that, and this is true in the United States especially, right? There are all these interesting studies about preschool preparedness and gender and children, and one in particular from the University of Oregon sticks in my head because they looked at children and their preparedness in 3 or 4 Asian countries and the United States, and they found that in the United States in particular, people don't think boys can control themselves. And so what they think becomes what actually happens, and boys are not held accountable for controlling themselves, and we go from there. And so little girls are more prepared, generally speaking, because they are expected to be prepared. And so there are all kinds of incidents that I'm sure many of us can recall that I've seen over and over again as a parent, which include things like, you know, little children sitting around and personal space being violated. And instead of teaching respect for that space or talking about what are essentially, you know, preschool citizenship rights, right? Like people have their rights and they have their space. Very often there's a child, and it's not always a boy doing this to a girl, but it's frequently the case, that is poking or stroking or hugging or getting way too close. They will move the child who is being targeted and move that child to like another class if she's disturbed. And that really sends the wrong message, right? There's nothing about that dynamic that's really helpful to anybody. But that's how early it starts. And as it pertains to anger, even in infancy, we know that adults are much more inclined to attribute negative, angry behaviors and words to children they think are boys. But with girls, they'll take the same behaviors and they'll describe them in terms of sadness or a kind of anxiety, agitation. Same behavior, but totally different set of words and expectations.
This idea of like how we're socialized differently to be, you know, women, we literally don't have the permission to express our anger. As men, you're allowed to. It's permissible to a certain extent.
As you know, you really get into the racial and ethnic aspects of that. It's not the fact that most men can express anger. And President Obama could not express anger. You know, the anger translator skits that we all laughed at were real.
Yeah.
You know, and so we see that very early on too. I mean, young black girls are penalized for behaving in ways that young white boys are actually being protected for. What we designate as leadership in one child is seen as disruptive and needing discipline in another.
This week we had 2 really prominent examples of black women's anger in the media, or like women of color's anger in the media. First was Serena at the US Open final, expressing anger, doesn't use a curse word, doesn't, you know, it's not even, I mean, John McEnroe like showed clips of himself, he posted clips of himself.
Like Djokovic.
Calling umpires son of a bitch and all this and not getting penalized for it. While you were watching that, what were you thinking? I mean, just even her body language was so, like you could tell that she had to lower her voice when the referees came out.
I mean, just
yeah.
you could see, I thought that, actually what it reminded me of, oddly enough, was when Uma Thurman described her Me Too response.
Yes.
And she kept saying, I'm not going to use anger and I'm not going to talk about anger, but every ounce of her body was thrumming with rage. And so there's all that sort of tensile quality to the interaction. But what's interesting to me about what happened on the court was it's always the responses. And there are people who just want to focus on the moment and without the context and without the history and without the accrued effects of what's going on, and just pinpoint that moment as though it exists in a vacuum. And that's not particularly helpful. I'm still amazed by two things. One is that she was levied the largest fine ever for verbal abuse. And we've all heard the verbal abuse examples that defy any characterization of what she did as the most extreme. And the second is that there are a group of umpires, referees now, saying that they will not officiate at her games. And to me, that's just, okay, we're going to pick up our toys and go. Yeah. And it's it reminds me of the social sciences, where economics became so prominent because women started to be successful in all of these other social science fields. And men literally just were like, we're out of here. We're going to go do that other thing, and we're going to be really hostile to you, and we just want this space. As a mother, as a nurturer, and so politically we see that in the temperance movement, we see it in, Moms Against Drunk Driving, the Children's Defense Fund, women who are really pressing for gun regulations. And so it's almost as though we just have to say, fine, we know, now let us say our piece. When women do that, they're given a little more flexibility to be angry, because they've sort of said, okay, fine, I get it, I'm not going to transgress in that way. But tears are really interesting too, because I think that, particularly in interpersonal interactions, women cry out of rage, but it also then confirms a lot of femininity. I'm sad, or I'm weak, or I'm vulnerable, or I'm not threatening you in this certain way. And it just is something that happens, it's something we are socialized to do. And I think a lot of men might be surprised to hear that actually I'm crying because I am enraged. I'm not crying because I'm sad. I'm actually so angry I can't get words out. I'm not saying anger makes these sicknesses happen, or not being angry is going to cure these illnesses, but anger is such a central feature to so many of the issues, women's issues, that we encounter. So things like anxiety and depression and eating disorders, and even like chronic pain. Women all over the world have much higher rates of chronic pain. And one of the surprising things I found out was that anger modulation, like being able to make meaning out of your anger, significantly improves your ability to deal with pain. And that quality of making meaning has all kinds of other health benefits that we never associate with emotional life.
Yeah, reading it really made me think about how much art and music and writing and creativity we have yet to see because of women's suppressed anger.
Yes, but also I just think there's so much there that we don't associate with women's anger that we should. So I had a wonderful conversation with Janelle and I, and we talked extensively about this, because there is in music, for example, there's so many examples of women writing music that is fueled by anger, but it's joyful, right? Like, I made a playlist when I was writing this book because I wanted to hear other angry women who had found joy. And it was fun, because I like the music, and we just don't associate it with women's anger. And so in the middle of writing this book, I think I heard Bono say, there's really no space for angry young men anymore. And he just said it. And I was like, okay, I guess, no. But there's all this music, and if you listen to the words and if you pay attention to how the women got to the music, it's through anger. But they just transformed it into this thing that actually creates solidarity for women.